The victory was short-lived. Though the townspeople had managed to drive the aliens back once again, the cost of their defiance became clear almost immediately. Power lines were down, homes were damaged, and supplies were dwindling. The streets of Havenbrook were quieter now, the initial burst of hope replaced by exhaustion and uncertainty. But despite the challenges, there was a new sense of unity among the survivors. They had faced the unknown together, and they had stood their ground. Jack spent the following days helping rebuild what had been lost. He patched roofs, cleared debris, and checked on families who were struggling to recover. It wasn't glamorous work, but it mattered. Every nail hammered, every meal shared reminded him why he had stayed behind when everyone else fled. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it was resilient, and that resilience was its greatest strength. Mia continued documenting everything, her camera capturing moments of both despair and determination. She uploaded videos online, sharing Havenbrook's story with the world. To her surprise, the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from across the globe. Stories of other towns standing up to the aliens, scientists offering theories about their technology, even offers of help. For the first time, Mia felt like they weren't fighting alone. Dr. Bennett focused on studying the remnants of alien tech left behind after the battle. Though the original crystal was gone, fragments of drones and pieces of machinery provided clues about how the invaders operated. Her research led to breakthroughs that helped improve their defenses, making them better prepared for future encounters. "We're learning," she told Jack one evening as they sat outside the fire station. "Every day we get smarter. That has to count for something." As weeks passed, the aliens returned less frequently, their presence more cautious than aggressive. When they did appear, the people of Havenbrook were ready. Armed with improved devices and coordinated strategies, they'd managed to hold their own, forcing the ships to retreat time and again. It wasn't peace, but it was progress. One night, as Jack stood on the beach watching the stars, Mia joined him. "Do you think they'll ever leave us alone?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Jack replied honestly. "But I do know this. We've shown them we're not just going to roll over and let them take what they want. Maybe that's enough to make them think twice." Mia smiled faintly, looking out at the horizon. "You know, when this all started, I thought we were doomed. But now, I feel like maybe we have a chance." Jack nodded, his gaze steady. "We've got more than a chance. We've got each other. And as long as we keep working together, we can face whatever comes next." In the distance, a single star flickered brightly before fading into the night. Jack didn't know if it was a sign or just another quirk of the universe, but it gave him hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Havenbrook had proven something important. Humanity wasn't defined by its mistakes. It was defined by its ability to rise above them. The aliens might return someday, stronger and more determined than before. But Jack knew one thing for certain: Havenbrook would be ready. Not because they had advanced weapons or superior technology, but because they had something far more powerful: courage, unity, and an unshakable belief in the value of life. And so, under the vast, endless sky, the people of Havenbrook carried on. Their story wasn't over. It was only beginning. The next morning, the town of Havenbrook began to stir as news of the aliens' departure spread. Refugees who had fled in fear started trickling back, their faces pale but hopeful. Jack, Mia, and Dr. Bennett worked tirelessly to rally the townspeople, explaining what had happened and what was at stake. It wasn't easy. Many were too scared or angry to listen. But slowly, a sense of determination began to take root. "We can't just sit around waiting for them to come back," Jack said to a small crowd gathered outside the fire station. His voice was firm, cutting through the murmurs of doubt and fear. "If we want to survive, we need to act now." Mia stood beside him, holding up her camera. "I've been documenting everything. The ships, the drones, even the alien we met. If we share this with the rest of the world, maybe others will join us. We're not alone in this." Dr. Bennett nodded, adding her own perspective. Their technology is advanced, but it's not invincible. That pulse we created proved that, with everyone working together, we might be able to find a way to protect ourselves, and maybe even negotiate a solution. The crowd exchanged uneasy glances, but a few people stepped forward, volunteering to help. Among them was Ryan, a mechanic who offered his garage as a workshop for building more devices, like the one they'd used against the drones. Another volunteer, Claire, suggested setting up a communication network to warn other towns about the aliens' arrival. Bit by bit, a plan began to form. Over the next few days, Havenbrook transformed into a hub of activity. People worked around the clock, scavenging materials, testing new ideas, and preparing defenses. Jack led efforts to train volunteers in basic firefighting and emergency response, knowing that chaos would follow if the aliens returned. Maya filmed interviews with anyone willing to speak, hoping to inspire unity beyond their small town. And Dr. Bennett pored over notes and sketches, trying to decipher the patterns she'd seen on the crystal. Despite the progress, tensions ran high. Supplies were running low, tempers flared, and some doubted whether their efforts would make any difference. One evening, as Jack sat on the steps of the fire station staring at the horizon, Mia joined him, her camera slung over her shoulder. "You look tired," she said softly, sitting down beside him. "I am tired," Jack admitted, rubbing his face with both hands. "But I can't stop. Not now." Mia hesitated before speaking again. "Do you think we're doing the right thing? What if we're just delaying the inevitable?" Jack sighed, leaning back on his elbows. "I don't know. Maybe we are, but giving up isn't an option. Even if we fail, at least we'll have tried. That's got to count for something." Before Maya could respond, Ryan appeared, waving frantically. "Jack, you've got to see this." They followed him to the garage, where a group of volunteers had assembled a prototype device based on the original design. It was bigger and sturdier, with reinforced wiring and a larger power source. At its center sat a replica of the alien crystal, crafted from bits of salvaged tech and glowing faintly. "This could work," Dr. Bennett said, inspecting the machine closely. "If we can amplify the signal enough, it might disable multiple drones, or even an entire ship." "It's ready for testing," Ryan added proudly. "We just need to know when and where." Jack nodded, a flicker of hope reigniting in his chest. "All right, let's get it loaded onto the truck. If those ships come back, we'll hit them hard." As the team prepared the device, the hum of engines filled the air. Everyone froze, their eyes turning skyward. In the distance, dark shapes descended, alien ships returning to Havenbrook. The moment of truth had arrived. "Stay sharp," Jack said, gripping the controls of the device tightly. "This is our chance to show them we mean business." The townspeople scattered to their positions, armed with whatever tools and weapons they had managed to gather. As the ships loomed closer, Jack activated the device, sending a powerful pulse rippling through the air. Drones plummeted from the sky, and the largest ship shuddered violently, retreating higher into the atmosphere. For a brief moment, cheers erupted across the town. They had struck another blow. But Jack knew better than to celebrate. This wasn't victory. It was survival. And the fight was far from over. The alien stood motionless, its glowing eyes fixed on Jack, Mia, and Dr. Bennett. The air in the room felt heavy, charged with an energy that made it hard to breathe. None of them moved, their hearts pounding as they stared at the towering figure before them. Its exoskeleton shimmered faintly, reflecting the golden light emanating from the crystal. For a moment, no one spoke. Finally, Jack found his voice. "We didn't mean to take anything," he said slowly, choosing his words carefully. "We were just trying to protect our town." The alien tilted its head slightly, studying him with an unreadable expression. "Your actions have caused harm," it replied, its tone calm but firm. "You disrupted our mission, a mission vital to the survival of my people." Mia stepped forward hesitantly, clutching her camera like a shield. "But your mission is killing us," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "If you keep draining Earth's energy, everyone here will die." The alien paused, its gaze shifting to Mia. It seemed to consider her words for a long moment before responding. "Your species consumes without thought, destroying what sustains you. We do not seek to harm, only to survive. Our needs outweigh yours." Dr. Bennett frowned, stepping closer despite her fear. "That's not fair," she said. "You can't just take what you want because you're stronger. Humans are capable of change. If you gave us a chance, we could find another way." The alien's eyes narrowed slightly, and the hum in the room grew louder. "Change," it echoed, almost skeptically. "Your kind has had centuries to correct its mistakes, yet you continue to poison your world, even as it crumbles around you." Jack clenched his fists, frustration bubbling inside him. "We're not all like that," he said sharply. "Some of us fight to protect this planet every single day. You can't judge all of humanity based on the worst of us." The alien turned its attention to Jack, its glowing eyes piercing through him. "And what would you do if roles were reversed? Would you sacrifice your own survival for a species less advanced than yours?" Jack hesitated, the question hitting harder than he expected. He glanced at Mia and Dr. Bennett, both watching him intently. Finally, he shook his head. "No," he admitted, "but I'd try to find a way where nobody has to lose." For the first time, the alien's expression softened, or at least it seemed to. It lowered its head slightly, as if considering his words. "Perhaps there is truth in what you say," it murmured. "But trust must be earned, not given freely." Mia took another step forward, emboldened by the alien's reaction. "Then let us prove ourselves. Give us a chance to show you we're worth saving." The alien studied her silently, the hum in the room fading slightly. Then it extended one of its long, slender arms toward the crystal. The artifact lifted into the air, hovering between them. "This belongs to us," it said firmly. "Return it, and we will grant you one opportunity to demonstrate your resolve." Jack exchanged a glance with the others. They all knew this was their only shot. Slowly, he nodded. "Fine. Take it. But if you break your promise, we'll fight back, even if it costs us everything." The alien regarded him for a moment longer before nodding. With a flick of its hand, the crystal vanished, absorbed into its palm. The golden light faded, leaving the room dim and silent once again. Without another word, the creature turned and walked out of the fire station, disappearing into the night. As the door closed behind it, Mia sank onto a chair, her hands shaking. "Do you think it meant what it said?" "I don't know," Jack replied, running a hand through his hair. "But we got work to do. Whatever happens next, we need to be ready." Dr. Bennett nodded, already scribbling notes furiously. "We need to spread the word, get people working together. If we're going to prove ourselves, we'll need all the help we can get." Jack looked out the window, watching the stars glitter faintly in the sky. The aliens might have left for now, but their presence lingered like a shadow over Havenbrook. One chance, that's all they had. And Jack knew they couldn't afford to waste it. The silence after the ships retreated was almost deafening. Jack, Mia, and Dr. Bennett stood in the fire station, their breaths heavy from the adrenaline still coursing through their veins. The makeshift device lay on the floor, its wires smoking faintly from the energy surge. Outside, the streets of Havenbrook were eerily quiet, as if the entire town had been holding its breath along with them. For a moment, relief washed over them. They had done it. They had forced the aliens to pull back, at least for now. But Jack's mind wouldn't let him rest. Something about the way the ships had risen into the sky felt off. It wasn't a retreat born of defeat. It was more like they were regrouping, recalculating. He glanced at the glowing crystal sitting on the table, its light dimmer than before, but still pulsing faintly. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't done with them either. "We need to figure out what just happened," Jack said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was calm, but there was an edge to it, a mix of determination and unease. Dr. Bennett nodded, adjusting her glasses as she studied the crystal. That pulse must have disrupted their systems somehow. Maybe it interfered with how they harvest energy. But we can't assume they're gone for good. Mia stepped closer to the table, her camera hanging loosely around her neck. Do you think they'll come back? They always come back, Jack replied grimly. But next time, they'll be ready for us. We got lucky today. Next time, we might not. The weight of his words hung in the air. None of them wanted to admit it, but Jack was right. What they had done was impressive, even miraculous, but it wasn't enough to win the fight. If humanity had any hope of surviving, they needed more than luck. They needed answers. Then we find a way to stop them, Maya said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension. We've already proven we can hurt them. That means we have a chance. Jack looked at her, surprised by her resolve. For all her nervousness earlier, she had grown stronger since the night began. He couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride. All right, he said. But first, we need to know more about that crystal. It's the key to everything. Together, they gathered around the table, examining the alien artifact once again. This time, they noticed something new. Tiny symbols etched into the surface of the crystal, barely visible unless viewed from a certain angle. They shimmered faintly, shifting and rearranging themselves like a language trying to communicate. Is that writing? Maya asked, leaning closer. It's possible, Dr. Bennett replied, pulling out a notebook to sketch the patterns. If we can decode it, we might learn what the aliens are planning, and maybe even how to stop them. As the others worked, Jack wandered to the window, staring up at the sky where the ships had disappeared. The stars were beginning to reappear, scattered across the horizon like pinpricks of light. He wondered how many other worlds out there had faced these same invaders, and whether any of them had survived. The thought sent a chill down his spine. Jack, Mia called suddenly, snapping him out of his thoughts. She was holding the crystal carefully, her face pale. It's warm, and I think it's reacting to me. Sure enough, the crystal's glow had brightened slightly, its rhythm matching the pace of Mia's breathing. She set it down quickly, stepping back. What does it mean? I don't know, Dr. Bennett admitted, frowning. But it's clear the crystal isn't just a tool. It's alive, or at least connected to something alive. Jack returned to the table, his jaw tightening. Whatever it is, it's dangerous. We can't keep messing with it unless we understand it better. Before anyone could respond, a low hum filled the room, not from outside, but from within the crystal itself. The symbols on its surface flared brightly, and a wave of energy rippled outward, knocking them off their feet. When Jack opened his eyes, the room was bathed in soft, golden light. In front of them stood one of the aliens, tall and shimmering, its exoskeleton reflecting the glow of the crystal. You have taken something sacred, the creature said, its voice resonating in their minds rather than their ears. Explain yourselves. Their gamble had paid off. But now, they faced judgment. The plan was risky, but it was all they had. Jack, Mia, and Dr. Bennett spent hours piecing together a device using the alien crystal, wires from the fire station's old radio, and parts scavenged from Jack's truck. The goal was simple: create a pulse strong enough to disrupt the aliens' drones without drawing too much attention. If they succeeded, it might buy them time to figure out a bigger solution. If they failed, they could end up making things worse, or worse yet, dead. As dawn broke over Havenbrook, the trio stood outside the fire station, their makeshift weapon ready. It looked crude, a tangle of wires attached to a car battery with the glowing crystal at its center. But it was their only hope. The alien ships still hovered above the town, their hum filling the air like an unshakable tension. Drones patrolled the streets, scanning for anything unusual. Jack knew they had to act quickly before the aliens noticed what they were doing. All right, Jack said, his voice low but firm. Here's how this is going to work. Mia, you stay back and keep watch. If any of those drones come too close, let us know. Dr. Bennett, you handle the controls. I'll get us close enough to one of their machines." Mia nodded, clutching her camera tightly. She didn't like being left behind, but she understood why Jack wanted her safe. Dr. Bennett adjusted her glasses nervously, gripping the wires connected to the crystal. "Just don't let me mess this up," she muttered under her breath. Jack gave her a reassuring smile. "You won't. We've got this." They moved cautiously through the deserted streets, sticking to alleys and shadows to avoid detection. Up ahead, a drone floated near a power substation, its blue lights flickering as it scanned the area. This was their target. Jack motioned for Mia to stay hidden, while he and Dr. Bennett crept closer, carrying the device between them. Every step felt heavier than the last, the weight of their mission pressing down on them. When they were within range, Jack stopped and turned to Dr. Bennett. "Do it," he whispered. Dr. Bennett took a deep breath and pressed the wires together. A sharp crackle filled the air as the crystal glowed brighter, sending out a wave of energy that rippled through the street. The drone shuddered violently, its lights dimming before it crashed to the ground with a loud thud. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the hum from the alien ships grew louder, almost angry. "It worked," Mia exclaimed, running toward them. But her excitement was short-lived. Above them, the ships began moving, lowering themselves closer to the ground. More drones appeared, swarming the area like insects. "We need to go. Now," Jack shouted, grabbing the device and pulling Dr. Bennett to her feet. They ran back toward the fire station, the sound of whirring drones growing louder behind them. The aliens weren't just investigating anymore. They were hunting. Back at the station, Jack slammed the door shut and barricaded it with whatever furniture they could find. The hum outside was deafening now, vibrating through the walls. Through the windows, they could see drones circling the building, their lights flashing urgently. "They're onto us," Maya said, panic creeping into her voice. "What do we do now?" Jack clenched his fists, his mind racing. They had struck a blow, but it wasn't enough. The aliens were too powerful, too advanced. Fighting them head-on was impossible. But then, an idea came to him. One last gamble. "We hit them where it hurts," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. "Their energy source, that's what they're here for, right? If we can cut off their access to it, maybe we can force them to leave." Dr. Bennett frowned. "How? Their tech is leagues ahead of ours." "Not entirely," Jack replied, pointing to the crystal. "That thing connects to their systems. If we can amplify the signal again and aim it at their main ship, we might be able to overload their equipment." It was a long shot, but it was all they had. Working quickly, they modified the device, adding more wires and boosting the power supply. Outside, the drones began pounding against the doors and windows, desperate to get in. Time was running out. "Ready?" Jack asked, looking at the others. "As ready as we'll ever be," Maya replied, gripping her camera like a lifeline. With a deep breath, Jack activated the device one last time. A surge of energy shot out, targeting the largest ship hovering above the town. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a blinding flash, the ship shuddered and began to rise, retreating higher into the sky. One by one, the other ships followed, their drones abandoning their posts. The hum faded, replaced by an eerie silence. They had done it, or so they thought. But as the dust settled, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Not yet. Back at the fire station, Jack and Mia spread out their findings on a wooden table. The glowing crystal sat in the center, its faint pulse casting an eerie light across the room. Around it, they placed pieces of alien tech salvaged from the downed drone. Fragments of metal, wires that shimmered like liquid, and small components that hummed softly when touched. It all looked otherworldly, far beyond anything either of them had ever seen. Mia picked up one of the smaller pieces, turning it over in her hands. "This stuff is incredible," she said, her voice filled with awe. "It's like nothing we've got on Earth." "Yeah, well, incredible doesn't mean safe," Jack replied, eyeing the crystal warily. He still didn't trust it. Every time he looked at it, he remembered the strange visions it had given him earlier. Galaxies burning, planets crumbling. Whatever this thing was, it wasn't just a piece of machinery. It felt alive, almost as if it carried memories or emotions from another world. Mia nodded, sensing his unease. "You're right. We need to be careful. But if we don't figure out what this is, how are we supposed to stop them?" Jack sighed, running a hand through his soot-streaked hair. She had a point. They couldn't fight blind. If these aliens were here to harvest resources, or worse, they needed to understand why. And this crystal might hold the key. As they examined the pieces, Mia noticed something odd about the crystal. When she tilted it slightly, faint patterns appeared on its surface, shifting and changing like waves in water. "Look at this," she said, holding it up for Jack to see. "It's reacting to movement." Jack leaned closer, squinting at the patterns. "Maybe it's some kind of interface, like a way to communicate or control," Mia added thoughtfully. "If we can figure out how it works, maybe we can use it against them." Before Jack could respond, the door to the fire station creaked open. Both of them froze, their eyes darting toward the entrance. A man stepped inside, his face pale and drawn. It was Dr. Laura Bennett, a scientist who had been studying the aliens' arrival since the first ship descended. Her glasses were askew, and her clothes were rumpled, as if she hadn't slept in days. "I heard you two were still here," she said, her voice shaky but determined. "I need your help." Jack crossed his arms. "What do you know?" Dr. Bennett walked over to the table, her gaze locking onto the crystal. "More than I wish I did," she admitted. "Those ships aren't just exploring. They're harvesting energy, specifically Earth's electromagnetic field. If they keep going, they'll destabilize the planet. Oceans will rise, weather systems will collapse. It won't be survivable." Mia stared at her, horrified. "Why would they do that? Don't they care about the damage?" "They're not human," Dr. Bennett said grimly. "To them, we're probably just pests, an inconvenience standing in the way of survival." Jack clenched his fists. "So what do we do? Just let them destroy us?" "No," Dr. Bennett replied firmly. "But fighting them directly isn't an option. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours. What we need is a way to disrupt their operations without triggering retaliation." Mia glanced at the crystal again. "What if this is part of their system? Could we use it to interfere somehow?" Dr. Bennett hesitated, then nodded slowly. "It's possible, but tampering with alien tech is risky. One wrong move, and we could make things worse." "We don't have a choice," Jack said, his voice steady despite the weight of the situation. "If this is our only shot, we take it." For the next hour, the three of them worked together, testing the crystal and the other fragments. They used tools scavenged from the station, pliers, screwdrivers, even a car battery, to try and interact with the alien tech. At first, nothing happened. But when Mia accidentally touched the crystal while holding a wire connected to the battery, sparks flew, and the lights in the station flickered wildly. "What was that?" Jack asked, startled. "I think I triggered something," Maya said, her heart racing. "The crystal reacted to the electricity." Dr. Bennett's eyes lit up. "That's it. If we can amplify the signal, we might be able to send a pulse strong enough to disable their drones, or at least slow them down." Hope sparked in Jack's chest for the first time in days. Maybe they weren't powerless after all. With the crystal and their makeshift tools, they had a chance. A slim one, but a chance nonetheless. As they continued working, the hum of the alien ships outside served as a constant reminder of the stakes. Failure wasn't an option. Jack and Mia stood frozen as the alien ship loomed closer, its massive form blotting out the stars. The air grew heavier, charged with an energy that made their skin prickle. Bright beams of light shot down from the vessel, scanning the area around them. Jack instinctively stepped in front of Mia, shielding her with his body. He didn't know why he felt the need to protect her. Maybe it was the firefighter in him, always ready to put himself between danger and someone else. "They're looking for something," Mia whispered, clutching her camera tightly. "Do you think it's because of the drone?" "Probably," Jack muttered. His mind raced. If the aliens were here to investigate the crash, they couldn't stick around much longer. But curiosity kept him rooted to the spot. That glowing crystal inside the broken drone was unlike anything he'd ever seen, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it held answers. The ship hovered silently for a moment before lowering even further. A hatch opened on its underside, and several more drones descended, surrounding the wreckage of their fallen companion. One of them emitted a soft hum, and the damaged drone began to glow faintly. Pieces of it started floating upward, reassembling themselves mid-air like some kind of alien magic. Jack watched in stunned silence, his jaw tightening. These creatures weren't just advanced, they were beyond comprehension. "What do we do now?" Maya asked quietly, her voice trembling. She had tried to stay brave this whole time, but facing the unknown was starting to wear on her. "We leave," Jack said firmly. "Now." He grabbed her arm gently but firmly, pulling her back toward the truck. They couldn't afford to be caught snooping around. Whatever these aliens were capable of, they clearly didn't take kindly to interference. But as they turned to go, one of the drones suddenly turned its attention to them. Its blue lights flared brighter, and it emitted a sharp, piercing sound. Jack froze again, his instincts screaming at him to run, but his feet refused to move. The drone floated closer, studying them with what felt like cold, calculating intelligence. For a moment, neither of them breathed. Then, unexpectedly, the drone stopped. It hovered there for a few seconds longer before turning away, seemingly uninterested. Jack let out a shaky breath, his heart hammering in his chest. "That was too close," he muttered, grabbing Maya's hand and hurrying back to the truck. Once they were safely inside, Jack drove away as fast as he could without drawing attention. Neither of them spoke until they reached the outskirts of town, where the streets were dark and empty. Jack parked near an abandoned gas station and killed the engine. The silence was deafening. "What was that?" Mia finally asked, breaking the tension. "Why didn't they attack us?" "I don't know," Jack admitted, rubbing his temples. "Maybe they don't see us as a threat. Or maybe," he trailed off, unsure how to finish the thought, "maybe the aliens had bigger concerns than two humans poking around their tech." Either way, it was clear they weren't dealing with ordinary invaders. Mia pulled the small crystal from her pocket, the piece she'd grabbed from the wreckage while Jack wasn't looking. She held it up to the dim light, examining it closely. It pulsed faintly, almost rhythmically, like a heartbeat. "This thing, it's important," she said softly. "I think it's part of why they're here." Jack frowned. "We shouldn't mess with it. Who knows what it can do?" "I know," Maya replied, her tone serious. "But if we want answers, this might be our only chance. We can't just sit back and wait for them to destroy everything." Jack hesitated. He wanted to argue, to tell her they should focus on survival instead of playing scientist. But deep down, he knew she was right. If the aliens were harvesting resources, or worse, they couldn't afford to be passive. Humanity needed fighters, people willing to stand up even when the odds seemed impossible. "Fine," he said reluctantly, "but we're careful. No risks unless we absolutely have to." Mia nodded, relief washing over her face. Together, they decided to head back to the fire station. It was safe, familiar, and stocked with supplies. More importantly, it gave them a base of operations, a place to plan their next move. As Jack restarted the truck and drove through the deserted streets, he couldn't help but glance up at the alien ships still hovering above the town. Their presence was a constant reminder of how fragile life really was, and how much depended on what happened next. The fire roared as Jack and Mia arrived at the scene. Flames climbed high into the night sky, casting an orange glow over the beach. The heat was intense, even from a distance, and the smell of smoke filled the air. Jack jumped out of the truck, grabbing his gear with practiced ease. He strapped on his helmet, pulled on his gloves, and grabbed the fire hose. Maya stayed back, unsure of what to do but unwilling to leave. "Stay by the truck," Jack shouted over the crackling flames. "And keep an eye on those drones." Mia nodded, though her eyes were wide with fear. She had never been this close to a real fire before. It was terrifying. Alive, almost, as if it had a mind of its own. But she forced herself to focus. If Jack could face this danger head-on, then so could she. She turned her attention to the alien drones hovering nearby, watching them carefully for any sudden movements. Jack aimed the hose at the base of the blaze, drenching the wooden structure with water. Normally, this would have been enough to bring the fire under control. But tonight, something was different. The flames didn't behave the way they should. Instead of shrinking back, they seemed to twist and writhe, resisting the water like living creatures. Sparks flew in every direction, igniting new patches of grass and debris. "What's going on?" Mia called out, her voice trembling. "Why isn't it working?" "I don't know," Jack yelled back, frustration clear in his tone. He adjusted the nozzle, trying to increase the pressure, but the fire only grew stronger. It pulsed with unnatural energy, glowing brighter than any ordinary blaze he'd ever seen. For a moment, he wondered if the aliens were somehow controlling it, but that thought only made him push harder. He couldn't let fear distract him now. As the fire spread toward a cluster of trees, Jack spotted one of the alien drones moving closer. Its blue lights flickered erratically, and it hovered just above the ground, seemingly drawn to the flames. Without thinking, Jack directed the hose toward the drone, spraying it with water. The machine sputtered, emitting a loud screech before crashing to the ground. Smoke curled up from its damaged frame, and the strange hum that had filled the air since the ships arrived suddenly grew quieter. "Did you just break it?" Maya asked, her voice full of disbelief. "I don't think we have time to celebrate," Jack replied grimly. The fire was still spreading, and the gas tanks beneath the station were ticking time bombs. He turned his attention back to the task at hand, determined to contain the blaze before it reached the tanks. Working together, Jack and Mia managed to create a makeshift barrier using sand and wet blankets from the truck. They smothered smaller fires as they appeared, cutting off the flames' path to the tanks. It was exhausting work, and the heat was unbearable, but slowly they began to gain the upper hand. The main fire finally started to die down, leaving behind charred ruins and thick clouds of smoke. When the last flame was extinguished, Jack dropped to his knees, breathing heavily. His face was streaked with soot, and his clothes were soaked through with sweat and water. Mia knelt beside him, equally spent but relieved. "We did it," she said softly. "For now," Jack replied, glancing toward the down drone. Something about it bothered him. It wasn't just a machine. It felt alive. Against his better judgment, he walked over to inspect it more closely. The casing was cracked, revealing wires and circuits unlike anything he'd ever seen. Nestled inside was a small glowing crystal, pulsating faintly with light. "What is that?" Maya asked, peering over his shoulder. "I don't know," Jack admitted. He reached out cautiously, brushing away some of the debris covering the crystal. As soon as his fingers touched it, a jolt of energy coursed through him. Images flashed in his mind. Stars collapsing, galaxies forming, worlds burning. He yanked his hand back, startled. "You okay?" Maya asked, concern in her voice. Jack nodded, though his heart was racing. "That thing. It's not just tech, it's something else." Before they could discuss it further, a low rumble echoed through the air. One of the alien ships descended lower, its lights flashing urgently. Jack and Mia exchanged a glance, both knowing they were running out of time. Whatever these visitors wanted, they weren't done yet, and Havenbrook was far from safe. Jack followed the whirring sound down the dark, empty streets of Havenbrook. His flashlight cut through the shadows, revealing nothing but deserted homes and flickering streetlights that buzzed weakly before going out altogether. The hum from the alien ships still lingered in the background, a constant reminder of their presence above. As he neared the beach, the noise grew louder, sharper, almost like machinery powering up. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and slowed his pace, careful not to make too much noise. When he reached the shoreline, what he saw stopped him cold. One of the alien ships had lowered itself closer to the water, its massive form casting an eerie glow over the sand. Strange drones floated around it, sleek and insect-like, with glowing blue lights along their edges. They moved with precision, scanning the area as if searching for something. Jack crouched behind a pile of driftwood, watching intently. His heart pounded in his chest, but years of training kept him calm. Whatever these things were doing, they weren't just passing through. Suddenly, one of the drones turned toward him. Its light pulsed brighter, and for a moment, Jack thought he'd been spotted. He held his breath, frozen in place. But then the drone shifted its focus back to the ship, continuing its task. Jack exhaled slowly, realizing how close he'd come to being discovered. He needed to leave, but curiosity pulled at him. Who were these aliens? What did they want? And why were they here? Before he could decide what to do next, a voice startled him. "You're not leaving, are you?" It was soft but firm, coming from somewhere behind him. Jack spun around, his flashlight beam landing on a woman standing a few feet away. She looked about 30, with short brown hair and a camera slung around her neck. Her name was Mia Dawson, and she was a journalist who had recently moved to Havenbrook. Jack recognized her from the local diner, where she often worked on her laptop. "What are you doing here?" Jack whispered, keeping his voice low. "Everyone else is gone." "I could ask you the same thing," Maya replied, stepping closer. "I stayed because I wanted to document this. People deserve to know what's happening." Jack shook his head. "This isn't some story to write about. Those things," he pointed toward the drones, "they're dangerous. You shouldn't be here." Mia crossed her arms. "And yet here we both are. Look, I'm not asking for permission. I just think maybe we can help each other. You know this town better than anyone, and I've got a knack for figuring things out." Jack hesitated. He didn't trust her completely, but she had a point. Two sets of eyes were better than one, especially when facing the unknown. "Fine," he said finally, "but stay close and do exactly what I say." Together, they crept closer to the activity near the ship. From their new vantage point, they could see more clearly what the drones were doing. One of them hovered over a patch of sand, emitting a thin beam of light that seemed to dig into the ground. Another carried a strange object, a glowing crystal that pulsed rhythmically, almost like it was alive. The sight made Jack uneasy. Whatever these aliens were collecting, it wasn't random. They had a purpose. "They're taking something," Mia murmured, snapping photos with her camera. "But what?" "Doesn't matter," Jack replied. "If they're messing with our planet, it can't be good." As they watched, one of the larger drones malfunctioned. Sparks flew from its underside, and it began to emit a high-pitched whine. Then, without warning, it crashed into an old gas station perched on the edge of the beach. Flames erupted instantly, spreading quickly across the wooden structure. Jack cursed under his breath. Even in the middle of an alien invasion, fire was still his responsibility. "We need to put that out," he said, already moving toward his truck. "Come on." Mia hesitated for only a second before following him. "Are you serious? We're dealing with aliens, and you're worried about a fire." "It's not just a fire," Jack shot back. "That gas station has tanks underground. If those catch, half the town goes up with it." Mia didn't argue further. She climbed into the passenger seat as Jack sped toward the blaze, his siren wailing into the night. Despite everything happening around them, the alien ships, the drones, the uncertainty, it felt oddly comforting to focus on something familiar. Firefighting was what Jack knew best, and right now, it was the one thing he could control. In the small coastal town of Heavenbrook, life had always been peaceful. The sunsets painted the sky in shades of orange and pink, the waves crashed gently against the shore, and the streets were lined with cozy homes. But one evening, everything changed. Strange lights appeared in the sky, bright and pulsating, unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. At first, people thought they were meteors or maybe even satellites falling out of orbit. Some joked that aliens were finally visiting Earth. No one imagined how close to the truth they were. As the lights grew brighter, a low hum filled the air, vibrating through the ground and into the bones of everyone who heard it. Then came the ships, massive, sleek structures that hovered silently above the ocean. Their surfaces shimmered like liquid metal, reflecting the moonlight in eerie patterns. Panic erupted almost instantly. Cars screeched out of driveways, families packed bags in frantic haste, and phone lines buzzed with desperate calls. Everyone wanted to get as far away from Havenbrook as possible. But not Jack Monroe. A firefighter for over 20 years, Jack was no stranger to danger. He had faced raging infernos, collapsing buildings, and unpredictable weather, all while risking his life to save others. To him, running away wasn't an option. As the rest of the town fled, he stood alone outside the fire station, staring up at the alien ships with a mix of awe and determination. His old red pickup truck was parked nearby, its bed loaded with emergency supplies. If trouble came, he would be ready. Jack wasn't entirely fearless. He felt the same unease gripping his chest as everyone else did. The unknown was terrifying, especially when it arrived in the form of giant floating objects from another world. But something inside him refused to give in to fear. Maybe it was pride, or maybe it was the memory of all the times he'd stepped into chaos when others couldn't. Whatever it was, it kept him rooted to the spot, watching and waiting. The aliens didn't make contact right away. For hours, their ships simply floated there, silent sentinels casting long shadows over the deserted streets. Jack wandered through the town, checking on abandoned houses and making sure no fires broke out. It was strange walking through Havenbrook without seeing any other people. The silence was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. Even the dogs and cats seemed to have vanished, leaving behind an unsettling emptiness. As night fell, Jack returned to the fire station. He sat on the steps, leaning back on his hands as he gazed up at the glowing ships. "What do you want?" he muttered under his breath, though he knew there was no answer. The question lingered in his mind, unanswered but persistent. Were these visitors here to help, or were they here to harm? And why had they chosen Havenbrook? Just as sleep began to creep over him, a new noise interrupted the quiet. A sharp mechanical whirring sound coming from the direction of the beach. Jack grabbed his flashlight and headed toward the source. Whatever it was, he intended to find out. After all, if the aliens were going to start something, they'd have to go through him first.